Hey everybody, this is Brian Aiello. On episode number 47 of Origin Stories on Creativity, I talk with Matthew Bin. He is a Canadian author, science fiction and nonfiction. He basically runs the gambit on works of writing. His current novel is a piece entitled Brandon's Way. It's about a farmer on the way to a terraformed planet. Matthew was a great conversationalist. We covered basically every topic you could possibly talk about, including the future of humanity, the past of humanity, and the current president of America, and how Trudeau is probably the greatest leader in North America. Do I agree with him? I'm a bit jealous. Don't tell anybody. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Brandon's Way is available on his Amazon.com author page and through his other social media, which will be available in the show notes. Highly recommend checking out his stuff. He's a good guy. Yeah. So, Matthew Bin. So you have written a lot of novels, actually. You're quite prolific. What number are you at right now in terms of actual novels published on Amazon?
Somewhere around 6, maybe.
Wow, that's interesting. And you're not indie published, are you? You're traditionally published.
A bit of both. Some of the novels that I put on Amazon were ones that I knew wouldn't be publishable for whatever reason. Some of them were short. I wrote 3 that were in a novel marathon, so I wrote them over 3 days. And those are fun, but they're not for publishers.
Tell me about that. Tell me about a novel marathon. What exactly would that be?
Well, it was a charity event that an addictions charity in Toronto set up. And they have sort of a facility in the city. And there'd be, 8 to 15 writers. And we would be able to only write on the premises of this facility. And we had sort of Spartan accommodations there. And I had 72 hours each time to write a novel, and I completed a novel in some form each time.
That's so fun. I love Canada. They seem to love the arts, and they set you guys up for success. I mean, they don't have anything like that. I live in New York City. They don't even care one way or the other.
It was really a special event for me, and there's a couple of other ones that run up here as well. These kinds of novel marathons, usually for charity, but it's kind of a crazy, and I really enjoyed it.
So you pay into it to get involved, or people pay you to write, and they pay you like number of pages, like a run or a walk type situation?
Well, it was just a straight up sponsorship, but anything from a couple of dollars to I got somebody donated $250 for one of my marathons. So yeah, I mean it was a very legitimate charity, well deserving of the funding, and very much needing the funding. So it worked out for everyone. It's called Renaissance. It's an addictions charity, and they deal with men, women, families, all kinds of different, drugs, alcohol, all kinds of different stuff, and they're doing great work.
How long was the novel at the end of the 72 hours?
My first one was about 40,000 words, and the second and third one were about 30 to 32,000 words.
And this is like straight writing too. Like you have 72 hours to go, and then like 3 days later, you're like hanging on to life.
That's right. And the last couple of hours are a little bit harrowing.
Right? I don't doubt it. I mean, there are places for you to take a nap. Actually, you know what I want to know? How many people are actually taking place or they're writing?
The biggest one was something like 15 or 18 writers, and there were points where everyone was in the room working because you could only submit what you did on the premises. So you couldn't like go home and write there. It was
God, man, I want something like that now. I really do. I want all of a sudden someplace in New York to say 72-hour writer marathon, find some sponsors, let's write a novel. What a great idea. 15 people in a room.
You guys
I couldn't even have that.
You guys set one up. I'm down there. I'll come.
Right? I mean, geez, across the country, 15 people, find some money. And how much did you raise altogether? Doesn't sound like millions of dollars, a couple thousand maybe?
No, so it was a few $1,000s each time. I don't recall the end figures, but I know that my own, I was raising, $500 to $1,000 for each of the runs I did, and some authors raised quite a bit more. So
It's still significant. I mean, that's money that
Yeah.
charity didn't have prior to you guys starting, which is nice.
Yeah, and every $3,800 they said was another person they could put through a treatment program. So it meant a lot to them to have like these 3-4 extra people who would get it, who otherwise wouldn't get help.
Art with purpose. I mean, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And what was the novel that you wrote?
The first one was sort of, it was kind of a fictionalized memoir of my years in a punk band. The second one was a horror novel, and the third one was a sort of a Cold War comedy, spy novel.
Had you gone in there with an idea of what you were going to write, or did you put words on paper and just were shaping it as you went along?
Well, the first one was sort of, because it was, telling kind of the story about me and my friend who's a guitarist. We're still in a band together, and the first days of getting together, I went in with just a list of the kind of crazy anecdotes I wanted to include. But the second and third ones, I outlined the hell out of them. I went really detailed, so I knew sitting down at any point what I was writing next.
Do you think it's fair to the world that Canada exists?
I think everybody should just come on up here. We've got the
want
space,
to, man. You guys won't let me. I want to live. Stop me.
I want you guys up here.
Sir, you can't bring your furniture. You're only allowed for a few months. We told you last time.
Yeah.
There's no reason to bring your couch.
Well, you guys are going to be able to claim refugee status if things keep going down there.
Oh
so.
my God, Bannon just quit today, or he got fired today. So I'm waiting for Trump to fire. I know. I'm waiting for Trump
I was
to
away from my desk for 2 hours.
What's that?
I said I was away from my desk for 2 hours and I missed it all. I didn't even know that.
I didn't. It was on Twitter just a few minutes ago.
There's no way to keep
fired. Whoops. He got fired. I am waiting for Trump to fire himself. It's just to happen.
Hey, I'm on board if that's going to happen.
I don't know what's going to happen, man. I do not want Pence to be president. I do not want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. I don't want Trump to be president either, but I don't want Pence to be president either. I really don't.
A bit of a rock and a hard place situation.
I cannot believe the middle of our country did this to us. I can't believe it. They don't have any jobs. They've got an opioid epidemic, and they've got a meth epidemic. They've got horribleness. And they decided to set us up with Trump. I mean, I guess it's revenge.
Think of us standing up above and unable to do anything to help. If we would just throw a lifeline down to you guys and get some of the smart guys out.
It's not fair. We just had our best president ever too, and now you guys have Trudeau. Yep. It's like, we've got our best prime minister, and we're going to laugh at you. How is Trudeau doing? Do you like him as a prime minister? Is he doing okay?
He's doing okay. He gets maybe a B- from me, but I'm a pretty raging bleeding heart lefty. So I got there's pluses and minuses, but in general I'm okay with him. I'd take Obama in a second.
Yeah,
that guy was something special.
The guy already. I mean, 8 years is fine. I mean, I like that. That's a limit. I wish our Congress had a limit too. I hate the idea of these 90-year-old men just sitting there forever, not doing anything, making a career of it. It wasn't meant to be like that. It wasn't meant to be like that.
No, it really wasn't.
It's scary. I mean, in terms of your fiction, in terms of your science fiction, do you write about dystopia, or what is your vision of the future? Because I mean, I was looking at your novel, the one that caught my attention on Reddit. Is it a dystopian future, or is it more of a utopian future?
I would say it's more in the middle. I don't think it's particularly dystopian, but I was thinking about the kind of dynamics that I see happening in the world and how that might play out. And I'm not a huge optimist.
You're not.
No. I guess over the next couple of centuries, things like climate change, the chickens are going to come home to roost on that one.
You're mentioning climate change, and the most interesting thing I've heard about climate change is the Earth has gone through so much climate change through its history, and it's going to do it regardless of whether they're humans here or not. And we are connected to the Earth in a way, and there's nothing we can really do to change things. I mean,
we've changed it pretty hard.
No, we've definitely done some damage over the last 100 years.
Yeah, and it was 250 years. Let's not forget that we've been belching coal smoke out. It's tough. Like I understand, and this is I was originally years ago I was quite a skeptic as well, and I would look at these because I was studying English literature, and there was a little mini ice age in the early 1600s.
It
Um,
has a lot to do with the Revolutionary War. A lot of the political climate during the 18th century, 18th century, what has to do with that ice age too. The thinking during that time frame could be
yeah,
blamed
yeah.
for
Well,
what we know
when you have
today.
mass crop failures, that does tend to affect a person, I guess. But the thing is that we've never seen anything as dramatic as worldwide as this. It doesn't, nothing comes close that we know of in Earth's history. So, and I kind of think that things like changes to the direction of the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic, there's a plausible scenario that I moved into the novel
Hmm.
where I'm also looking at, sort of a post-fossil fuel future where it's not as easy to transport things like food. So farming becomes kind of important again, even in currently what we'd call,
It's
a
so
modernized society.
devastating to the environment, and you have to
Yeah.
have the kind of mass farming that we do to feed or sustain the population. And I mentioned this to somebody
Hmm.
who did an interview on me the other time. It's so odd to be interviewed.
Hmm.
I'm so bad at it. I'm so, or I just have like these word salads I'm spitting out of my mouth. But in terms of like global population, as humans, we've never had this before, obviously.
No,
It just
no.
continues to increase. So we can't go back and read a book about, what Grandpa Jim did when the population was 7 point whatever billion people strong. This
Yeah.
is brand new. We talk about
Yeah.
millennials being, ruining this business and that business. We're, in
Yeah.
deep water here. We have no clue what's happening.
That's right. And it's only been a few generations, and neither humans nor the earth have really figured it out yet. So,
Yeah.
um, and that's what kind of puts me in that science fiction frame of mind is thinking about how these problems play out. I don't think anybody writes about the future. We really are writing about today, and that's of course what I'm doing as well. But it's a certain way of looking at today, I guess.
Yeah. I'm writing a science fiction novel too, as well, and
Hmm.
I am taking today into account. You can't write a science fiction novel without taking today into account. You're just adding
That's
to it,
right.
aren't you? You're kind of
Yeah,
putting the fire in underneath it a little bit and seeing where it ends up.
that's right. That's exactly right.
So, tell me a little bit about your plot, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. So the book was inspired by a song, actually, by a Toronto band, and about Irish immigrants going across the Atlantic and coming to North America. And as I was listening to this song one fine summer day, it occurred to me that there's the next wave of immigration. The song was about Saint Brendan, who's a legendary Irish saint who supposedly in around the 9th century crossed the Atlantic in a leather boat. And he was looking at how Irish settlers were moving across the Atlantic 1,000 years later, coming from Ireland to North America. And I kind of looked at the next iteration, which will be people moving from Earth to somewhere else, to a different planet. So it's about a young farmer who looks into a place on the a transport to the New World, and the condition is that this weird sort of revolutionary organization wants him to pose as the husband of a woman he's never met before. So to get her across. So that's what that's the premise of it is he's sort of on this voyage with a woman he doesn't know who doesn't seem to like him very much. And oh
Uh-huh.
yes, she's an assassin. So there's that. As happens to the best of us.
That's very interesting. So, are you well practiced in terms of being able to do the spiel, in terms of being able to tell your story, and I guess they call it the elevator spiel?
Well, clearly not. I've got a long elevator ride. I could probably manage it, but a short one, no. I'm not. I've done a lot of Twitter pitches and stuff like that, and I've learned to boil it down. But I run on at the mouth a little bit, I guess.
Do you? What do you look for in terms of the best way to tell the tale of your story the quickest way possible?
Well, I try to think of what's interesting about this character, and I think it's like the fact that he's with this he's posing as the husband of a woman who's an assassin, and he doesn't know any of that coming into the thing. I think is the interesting part. It's like
He does not know that this is an assassin, right?
no, no.
And he is
It's
a
like Luke
pilgrim to another
Skywalker.
planet.
I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. But I kind of see him as Luke Skywalker if Leia was a lot more ruthless. kind of
Leia was pretty ruthless, though, wasn't she?
yeah, she was
She
no
was like,
assassin though.
man, it's so fascinating. Now my mind is playing over the idea of interplanetary travel and setting up colonies elsewhere. And
Hmm.
as you were talking, I was just thinking about the idea of setting up a colony on the moon and how we kind of dropped the ball on that.
Yeah.
And the idea of, go ahead.
Well, a lot of things have to fall into place before we start doing that kind of thing. Um, Number one being political and social will to do that sort of thing, which apparently was dissipated in 1972 and never came back, right?
I
But
guess.
also, the amount of material we'd have to move up there, the amount of science we'd have to figure out in making a large livable habitat without oxygen or water that we take for granted here. It's such a massive problem, and we haven't.
Yeah.
I contend we haven't started on the problem. We can
No,
talk about it, but
can't you say that there is ice up there though? And I'm gonna say this, maybe there's Tranquility Crater. Is there a thing called like Tranquility Crater up there?
yeah, that's
Yeah,
I think
okay.
that's a lunar location. Yeah.
That there might be ice actually embedded either in the dust or
Hmm.
in the shadows, and that they can actually maybe possibly pull it out. But
Yeah, I mean, there's possibilities, but we haven't even started to work on it, right? Like
it's so
we're
sad. I mean, we're
speculating at
talking
best.
like maybe 50 years worth of missed opportunity. And you know what makes me even madder is the fact that you look at the president that was overseeing NASA at that time. What a lying scumbag he was. There's a
Yeah,
possibility we never even
and
possibly went. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Oh man,
yeah.
it makes me mad. And the idea that we were actually in orbit, faking the whole thing. Do you think we went?
Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind.
There's none.
No, when I've read about these scientists, and not I mean, the astronauts are celebrities. The
Yeah.
scientists, the ones who did the math, those guys are still talking about it and talking about the kinds of things that they did and they figured out. And I
I
was
think
reading
we
one who was
could have
saying it was all on
gone.
paper.
I think definitely the math was there. I want us to have gone. To take that away from humanity is so freaking sad. You know, the land on the moon, my God, that was so fantastic. And it wasn't until recently
Yeah.
that you start looking at some of the things they did, kind of the scummy things. Like there's video of them like putting a black cloth over the windows of the inside of the lunar module and kind of taking video of the Earth and making it look smaller than it actually was. Like, my God, why'd you do that? And I look at Nixon going, why did you do this at the same time as you're being a scumbag politically? And Russia was happening and the bombing of Laos and like,
Yeah.
why
Well,
didn't we go back after 72? I mean, it's like,
yeah.
why? I hate
Yeah.
to be that person because I never was that person until just recently. Like, I want us to be at the moon. I want us to go to Mars too.
For sure, for sure, and I at least I'm an optimist enough to hope that we're going to do that in my lifetime, that I will see it, but we're not showing a lot of signs of it right now.
You know, like you said, though, I think the science is there. I think the math is there. I think we can get in a spaceship, a rocket. I think we can propel ourselves into the atmosphere. I think
Hmm.
we can build, obviously, a space station. We've done it. We can cooperate with other places on this Earth and other people. We can
Yep.
develop technology. We can push ourselves into outer space. My God, Cassini, right? That was the satellite that
Hmm.
just crashed into Saturn not too long ago.
That's
Beautiful.
right.
The Mars
Well,
rovers.
oh yeah, the Mars rover was an unbelievable success, but this is an orders of magnitude bigger problem to move people up there and have them stay, and we aren't willing to expend the personal, political, and financial capital to actually make that happen at this
Yeah,
point, and that's
because
why
you
we're
don't
not
want to
seeing
lose those
manned
astronauts.
missions.
They're dangerous. It's
That's
dangerous to do
right.
that. I mean, the radiation
It
is
is.
unbelievably extreme. And
So there's
the
a lot of
moon's,
issues.
yeah, I would love to see it happen. So, I mean, do you answer those questions in your novel? And why? How are we able to get past the human danger? I'm actually is so we're now. When does your
Yeah,
novel take place?
about 200 years from now.
About 200. So, how do we answer those questions in the next 200 years?
Well, I have this technique as a science fiction writer that I call hand waving. So I don't actually answer those questions.
It
I,
doesn't
I work to I work
matter.
to make it quite plausible that we figured them out. But of course, a farmer doesn't really know, who's on a transport, doesn't necessarily know the science behind it. Then we
No,
know, I've looked into some of
it
the
works. He's
possible,
breathing air.
terror.
He's living.
Yeah,
No, I got you.
well, questions of terraforming and so on, those are important things that a lot of other people have figured out. And I haven't even dealt with I don't explicitly deal with faster than light travel or artificial gravity. But I figure
Mhm.
we got 200 years for the reality to catch up
So
with my
you're
novel.
actually
So
going faster than light in your novel. Oh,
I think I have to be. I think I have to be. Yeah.
where are you going in your novel?
It's a relatively nearby, newly terraformed world.
Terraforming too. I love the idea
Yeah.
of terraforming. I'm
Yeah.
going
My
someplace
editor,
else as
luckily,
well. I'm going someplace else in my novel as well because I'm not going faster than light. I'm just going. I'm just letting them go like normal impulse and just
well,
taking tens of thousands of years.
well, that's the thing, and these generational starships and stuff are interesting ideas, but not something that I was grappling with. I really wanted to more have a bottle episode. I want to put everybody in an enclosed space, a couple thousand
Mhm.
people, and see what happened. And so that's where the novel came from.
So how long does it take?
About 4 months.
4 months to go from Earth to. So this is not anything new, though. I mean, this has been happening over the course of
Yes,
generations.
yes.
Are you curious to the? I mean, the 400 years, though. I mean, are you going to go back and explore that world building? The 400
Well,
years of
actually,
development.
I don't know how much of it I am going to explore, but I am working on another book that's set in that colonized world, without the same characters or anything. But looking at again, I think a lot of what I work on echoes history, and
Uh-huh.
looking at how we colonized, how the West world colonized like Africa, and
Mhm.
looking at how that would play out in a new world situation is sort of where my next novel works.
Absolutely destructive to whatever native life was there, right?
Well, luckily it was terraformed, so we had a blank slate. It's just I think that
Oh,
it's more
see,
about how
oops,
the
you broke up on me there.
society that moves to am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Well, I was looking at how the society that moves in maintains these power structures and these social structures have to, Um,
So let's examine that. What would you do
mhm.
in terms of you're obviously brand new. You've got everything you possibly could ever want in terms of land. You could move X number of people in to fill that spot. Once you're filled up that spot, you can go to another empty spot and fill up that empty spot, right?
Hmm.
It was a podcast I listened to not too long ago. They were talking about, it was just a random comment. I think maybe it was Bizarre States, which isn't something you'd get like esoteric stuff from, but they talked about how America was this endless frontier, and they can move an infinity number of people into it, and they could never
Yeah.
fill it up. But by 1910, they had filled it up. And it was an interesting thought to kind of play around with how the population just kind of boom, we have no more room. But in terms of space, there is kind
when
of
things
like
are but when things are really valuable, for example, when there's minerals there that can be mined and don't exist in any quantity in Earth, right? That kind of stuff can really change things and make people very desperate to get up there. I kind of see this as a new gold rush, the situation that I'm imagining for my purposes. But that also creates a lot of miners. So you have a large underclass doing dirty, low-paid work, and you've got some people who are controlling things. You might have some people who don't agree with the current situation and
yeah.
would maybe look to terrorism as a way to deal with it. And you've got social structures that we bring from home as well. You've got higher and lower order countries. Dictating things or being dictated to. So these are the kinds of things that I wanted to bring in. And again, I kind of wanted a clean slate to grapple with them.
You're not really
So that's where
exploring
it
the
comes from.
idea of the golems doing the work for the for the humans, though, the artificial life?
No, I haven't I haven't thought that in that direction at all. I kind of, human life tends to be kind of cheap, if you have enough power, and I kind of think that would be a more likely dynamic.
Human life. Humans are angry though, and they cause problems, and they're stupid, and
That
they're
they do.
dirty,
That they do.
and they blow people
I,
up,
well, yes.
make dumb decisions.
Well, one of the inspirations for this book in general was I did a previous nonfiction book about Canadian peacekeeping missions, and I spoke with
Yeah, I
a
saw that. What's up with that
yeah.
price? $265. Did you pick that, or
Oh,
did?
no, I don't know. I think it basically means it's out of print.
Oh, I
The ebook
see.
is still available, but the print copy, I think, because the publisher doesn't supply them anymore, they just, I don't know. The distributor jacked up the price or something. I'm not
So
sure,
if
but
you're that
don't pay
desperate,
that.
don't pay
Don't
that.
pay it.
If you're that interested, contact the author.
Exactly. Bingo.
He'll print out you a copy for a lot less money.
Exactly. It's no worries. But talking to a gentleman who was on a UN mission with the Canadian military in
Uh-huh.
Rwanda while the genocide was happening in Rwanda was a real. I mean, he was telling stories that just are heart wrenching, are just
You're talking
shocking.
about the genocide back like in the 90s.
94, yeah,
Yeah, horrible.
and 800,000 people killed, mostly by machete. It was an
Ugh.
incredible, gruesome situation. And this guy was one of 5 Canadian peacekeeping officers who were trying to keep a lid on the situation in where the UN building was, and trying to do something about this, trying to keep the two sides apart long enough so that they could start talking. So we Canadians, having been, we see ourselves as a peacekeeping nation. We see that as our military role in the world, and it just showed how difficult that desire is to actually achieve in that situation. So
Peace is an interesting concept, isn't it? Sometimes it takes
it is,
violence to keep peace. Yeah.
that it does, and that was the revolution of the UN peacekeepers. Was we're actually going to arm guys and put them in between the people who are fighting, and see how that works out. See if we can stop them fighting that way.
Or threatened with
Peacekeepers are
violence.
armed. Yeah. So, like I say, I saw some of this stuff being more long-term human struggle than just an event back then. And again, maybe history repeating itself to some extent.
Always, right? Without the lessons
Yeah,
anyway learned in
that's right.
terms of technology and the expenditure of resources and trying to grapple with attaining more resources. I mean, what's Earth like in your world, the world that you're building?
Well, I'm sad to say the U.S. doesn't do so well over the next
Uh,
couple centuries in my
the way
head.
things are going. So I imagine Trump is
Yeah,
still president. He's managed to.
I think Don Jr.'s in power at this point.
Oh
Uh,
no.
yeah, trouble. Um, but I also see that we keep
Is that a
moving. I see
prison,
the
huh?
pen. Well, I see that humans tend to move from large groups to fragmented groups fairly often. We kind of swing back and forth from big empires to small countries and so on. And I saw this as things shifting to big empires, with Western Europe and England and Ireland being one, and Asia being another, and Russia and Eastern Europe and Brazil, like these large forces that are currently sort of coalescing in our world today. I kind of took as where things would be. But as I said, there's also no end of issues on Earth, and I think that we're probably headed for some major conflicts in the next century, which is kind of I'm coming into my novel after that, but I think those are definitely there.
I don't know what's going to happen in terms of that, because we do, like I said, have a very, very overpopulated globe, and we don't like it.
Yeah, and
I,
resources
as
are
a human
thinning
being,
out.
do not like getting on a train that has too many people on it. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
I don't like smelling the guy
exactly.
in front of me. The guy behind me does not like smelling me. It makes us mad. It
Yeah,
makes us very upset
and
with each other, and I don't know what to
and
expect.
we're privileged guy, privileged living in North America. Let's try living in a slum in Mumbai for a few months and see how we feel then.
Right? I
Right?
mean, that's another thing
Yeah,
that you forget. What do they call it? First world problems. I mean, I have a nice, comfortable, air-conditioned home that I can live in.
exactly.
Today, I'm running around Midtown. It rained a little bit, and I hung out in front of underneath scaffolding with a hot cup of coffee and a bagel.
Yep.
Some people don't have that as an opportunity. They have to huddle in a puddle with nothing to eat. God, man, you think about that, as a picture, UNICEF picture of a child with a vulture just waiting for it to die, flies all over its
Exactly.
eyeballs or whatever. I mean, that's a reality. I have children. I have
Eh,
these two beautiful 2-year-old children. They're so wonderful. They're so healthy. A lot of parents don't get that opportunity. You remember that picture from last year, that Syrian boy that father had to drag out of the water, who drowned
Yep.
because they didn't have a home? I mean, that happens all the
Yep.
time. And not
That's
even
right.
that, just yesterday, something happened horribly in Spain because some dude was
Yes.
desperate enough to get behind the wheel of a van and drive over other human beings.
That's
Something in
right.
his mind clicked and said, you know what, I'd rather commit murder and be killed myself than to continue to live on this planet. I mean,
Yep.
granted, he might be a monster, but he did something horrendous instead of live with us.
That's right. And I kind of think that our responsibility as artists is to look at these things, to look at the crappier parts of humanity and deal with that. And that's why I don't think I'll ever write a utopian novel. And I think utopian novels tend to get into dystopia somehow anyway. But and I don't want to say everything is horrible from the start. I think humans have an infinite capacity to be pretty horrible. We also have a great capacity to be better than that, and I hope that's what that's what I want to do and what I want to see in the world. But I think it's really important as artists to look at those uncomfortable things and look at those difficult things and the things that as a society and as a humanity we do fairly poorly.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
One of the
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just
Well,
going
I
to
was
mention, please.
how are we going to duke this
there,
out?
there might be a slight little time gap between my statement and yours, but
I
please, I
think
would
there
like.
might be.
I invited you on my podcast, so I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, one of the inspirations for the novel that I wrote the novel in 2011, and the year before in 2010, there had been one of the G20 meetings was held in Toronto, and the Toronto is a clean, easygoing city, and
No,
it
I
turned
love Toronto.
into
It's beautiful.
yeah, and believe me, New York City is my favorite city in the world.
It's
Toronto
not.
has
It's
nothing
not.
on that.
It's not clean. It's not clean.
No, no, it's got a lot of other things going for it. But Toronto does have cleanliness going for it. But instead, it turned into a war zone for 3 days, and there were security fences all over the city. There were soldiers and heavily armed policemen all over the city. And this isn't Canadian. This isn't something we do. So during the weekend, there were a number of peaceful protests, which were limited to areas that the police said you can protest here, and these protests were broken up by baton wielding police and in riot gear, beating on and arresting innocent people. I mean, there was a streetcar driver in full uniform who was arrested as a rioter because they were just arresting everyone, and it was sickening. It was absolutely sickening, and it's not something that I accept in my own society, especially when we as Canadians are trying to. As a country, I think we try to strive to be the moral good guys in the world, and this is not who we were. And that was so upsetting to me that that a year later, this idea of dealing with people in positions of power and people who don't have power and how that works out. That's how I started writing Brendan's Way. Was a lot of the inspiration was this idea of riot cops beating the hell out of people and what gives them the right. And that's why I start with a farmer, because he's not a guy in power.
No, it's very interesting. Black Lives Matter, when that whole thing
Yep.
kicked off in St. Louis,
Mm-hmm.
we had some issues in New York. I'm not issues. I mean, we had some protests, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people thought they were going to turn violent. A lot of people were nervous, and it might have. I mean, some cops got spray painted. I think some water balloons with red paint in them got thrown at the chief of police here, and the mayor got splattered, and like people thought for sure it was going to get thrown down. I mean, cops got killed and, some horrible stuff. But,
Mm-hmm.
thankfully people were able to raise their voices and get heard, and it didn't turn into riots. It was just a protest.
Well, I often think this with any kind of social movement, like strikes are similar to this as well. The strikes get bad, protests get bad. What would stop them is if maybe politicians would respond to people's needs. Maybe if companies would respond to workers' needs, maybe these things wouldn't get as bad as they do. But we're in a situation in a lot of situation. I understand the Black community in the U.S. Starting the Black Lives Matter movement because a few too many of them are getting shot for no reason by people in power, and not just in power, but given violent power by our society, given immunity to any consequences for violent power. So these are the kinds of things that I think I tend to fall down on the protesters' side, and I agree. I don't want to see violence either, but there's a reason they're out there in the streets, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that's it. Is this feeling of powerlessness does tend to lead to more and more dramatic means of taking making one's voice heard. I don't agree with terrorism. I don't agree with violence. I became a pacifist somewhere in my life. I was in the army when I was younger, but now I'm a pacifist. But
Oh, okay. I was in the army too, actually. What was your job?
I was an artilleryman.
Oh, okay, I was a truck driver.
I was in the back of the truck.
I was the guy driving the truck over the potholes, getting
Right.
stuck in the
Thanks.
rivets on the side. I
Oh, I knew
got
plenty of you guys. I knew
I
plenty of
got
you.
told lots of that. Thank you, actually. Man, the infantry used to hate us. We'd drive them out to the field all the time, and I'd get stuff thrown at me. Like, dude, I make the freaking roads. But in terms
Yeah.
of your statement, I'm not a
Yeah.
pacifist. I will fight to defend myself. I don't mind that at all, and I don't look forward to it. But I'm prepared at least. I don't want to own a gun. I did speak to somebody the other day who doesn't mind owning weapons, and I'm like, you can't be 100% accountable for yourself. You can't
Mhm.
make those bullets hit what you want them to hit. You can't make
Yeah.
certain that that last bullet doesn't hit my kid or myself. I mean, you can't be 100% on top of it all.
That's it. And I mean, so we have to think about what our responsibility is as a society. You know, do we let citizens have guns? What are the limits? What are the caveats? Right. So these are important questions. And
Yeah, Canadian citizens aren't allowed to have guns, right? Or you
oh,
are.
we are, but not to the same extent that American citizens are. A lot more guns are prohibited, and they're a lot more closely controlled.
Well, I'm not a gun person, and I really think there's a lot of morons out there, and I don't think people should own guns because of that. I can't guarantee your intelligence, and therefore, I don't think you should own a gun.
I'm happy that we control it a little better than no controls, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with Canada's stance on it, and I'm okay with a relatively unarmed society.
I'm okay with that too. I am really okay with that. I'm fine with it. I really don't care. I feel safe not
Yeah,
having one. I'm 40 years old. I've never felt the necessity to own a gun.
same here.
I'd be more concerned with having to pull it out and shoot somebody than I would be not having it to shoot somebody. You know what I mean? I'd probably end up shooting myself in the foot or missing and shooting somebody. I mean, didn't intend to, or if I
Yeah,
misinterpreted the situation, shooting somebody that didn't mean any harm to me or something. There's no way to guarantee. I'm not going to have
exactly.
the opportunity to back up time and say, okay, yes, I did interpret that correctly, or something along those lines. No, I just don't want one. I just don't want one. What if I have a bad
Yeah,
day? You know what I mean?
bullets are forever. That's the problem.
What did you say?
Absolutely, absolutely. I said
And in
bullets are
terms
forever.
and in terms of the disenfranchised, I mean, yeah, man, there are some people, and I think we share those people. They had the opportunity to move to Canada at one point in our history. The Underground Railroad ran right through the
Mhm.
north up into Canada. The former slaves of the South. I mean, that was a
M-
horribly
m-
sad moment in
My
America.
my town is actually was a terminus on the Underground Railroad. Many blacks on the Underground Railroad.
I mean, that's a devastating moment in my country's history, and I
Yes.
think it's absolutely 100%, 100%, 100% despicable that there are states in this country that don't respect that, and that
Yeah.
these people are still being treated like shit, and that there are statues honoring these people that wanted to keep slaves. I guess, right? I mean, it's really bad. And the civil rights movement, nothing really good happened there, honestly. Their vote is being
Well,
denied. I mean, there are more black men being held in jails because of small amounts of weed and drugs. I mean, I don't know.
yeah. No, absolutely, and this is exactly where I'm coming from, and I kind of think that in a lot of ways, when we try to look to the future, we have to look to the past. We have to think about how these dynamics have played out and what we want to change, and that's where I think science fiction does play a role in looking at these dynamics that we know, saying where do they come from and where do we go from here, and what's and trying to sort that out. And I definitely see that a strong impulse to do that is behind a lot of.
Um, you're breaking up on me a little bit.
Oh no.
I think that's one of the question. Yeah, let's see. When we first got on the phone call and we started talking about science fiction in terms of utopian versus dystopian, and you said you're right in the middle. I think that's one of the places where you end up deciding which direction to go into. Does society fix its problems, or does society turn a blind eye to its problems?
Right. That's a good way of describing the dichotomy. And I would love to think the society is trying to fix its problems, and I know there are many good people doing that, but I don't see a lot of evidence for real fixes
No, I see blind eye,
happening.
honestly.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see there are what problems? I see corporate America jumping in and paying off politicians
Yeah.
in terms of lobbyists and making, politicians who weren't millionaires before coming into office becoming millionaires.
I agree. And, things like the war on drugs was not a realistic fix to the problem.
No,
And
it was a horrible fix. Ended lives. I mean, you know what it was? You put a man in prison, you take a father away from a child. And then
yep,
that child grows up to be a father poorly, or he ends up in
yes.
prison. I mean, it's just a very, very evil, secular thing that just makes bad people.
And, Portugal decriminalized all drugs and addiction went way down. Addiction treatments were adopted by far more people. Like this is the root. The Portugal solution is the solution,
I
and
think so.
there's all kinds of academic weight behind it, but very few countries are taking that dramatic solution, and I am very much an advocate for it in Canada. We are decriminalizing marijuana, which is a good first step. And I've never smoked
No,
marijuana. I don't give a damn
aren't you
about this stuff.
legalizing it? You're legalizing weed all the way across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and like I say, it's not something I do, but I'm happy that it's decriminalized because I don't want people going to jail for that. I don't want the state to have that much power over its people.
Yeah, I don't think that people should be going to jail for doing weed. And I don't
No,
think that anybody who has an opioid problem should be going to prison either, because I don't think it really helps you to
it
go to
doesn't.
prison and to have your life uprooted. I think you should get help because there's obviously something else happening. If you get a
Exactly.
surgery, you break your leg, and a doctor prescribes you a pain pill, and you find yourself having a hard time getting off of it, and you find yourself doing heroin eventually someday down the road, going to prison, I mean, you've made some choices that put you in a position where you're going to prison. It's not the drug necessarily that's going to wind you up in prison. It's going to be breaking in the cars and stealing radios and selling them for $5 a pop or something along those lines. So hopefully you get the
That's right.
help necessary beforehand. That's really interesting, the charity that you did to write one of your novels. I mean, I don't know. We're not going to have any solutions. We're going to write science fiction novels and maybe get them published, and maybe people will read them. And hopefully the politicians will stop taking money from lobbyists and make real laws and enact real change. And everybody will do their freaking jobs, and society will actually be a good place. Right?
It'd be nice to think. Hey, it'd be nice to think that that's going to happen. I agree, but I also
Doesn't
think
seem
that
likely.
well, I think maybe I'm expecting things to change at a different level, though. I would like people to. Well, I'd like people to think more like I do, obviously. But I think
Right.
I'd like
You
people to
want them to
be
think like you, because I really honestly think we do need that dichotomy. We need this us versus them.
That's true. I don't. I'm actually not advocating a monoculture here or anything, but I think it's worth putting questions out there in such a way that people will actually consider them, and maybe in considering them, see a way for things to move forward in a better way. I think that's what we can hope for as writers or as artists, is just to provoke the discussion. and provoke it in a certain way for a certain end, sure. But more important is to get people actually thinking about them, because complacency is our biggest enemy, I think.
Well, that's one thing I don't think we have currently in this country is complacency. Everybody has an opinion, and we just seem to be screaming at each other. Alt right, alt left. I mean, we just want we're at war. We're at war with words right now. We're looking for excuses to break each other's heads, and it's just coming. And now, I mean, unfortunately, it is coming to a head. And I just wonder how bad the explosion is going to be. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I
yes.
don't know if it's going to be the people across, the interstate coming this way with pitchforks or what. I don't know.
Well, Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, said for Canadians, living next to the USA is like sleeping with an elephant. The elephant doesn't know you're there, but every twitch and grunt you notice, and so we're kind of in that situation where we're really worried about you guys too, and I'm very much hopeful that things will calm down. But the kind of complacency I'm talking about are things like the fact that nobody votes, the fact that your electoral system has some serious problems. It's not
Yeah.
centralized. It's got the electoral college has its own problems. I mean, it was, to my mind, designed to make sure that slave owners could keep holding slaves. It was designed around these things, and it's not. I don't think it's a fair, equitable system. It's a difficult. The U.S. is a difficult country to run. I totally get that, and I have a lot of sympathy with that. But I think that people are not questioning the things that are maybe causing some of the biggest problems. The drug
You're not gonna
question
you're
being
not
another
gonna
one.
catch me trying to revamp our electoral college or system for that matter. I got a D in political science. Uh,
we can't all work on all the problems. That's fair enough.
I'm not gonna be able to fix that for you, unfortunately. I wrote a paper about immigration and failed it completely. Like the professor wrote and said, "Are you serious?" F.
Wow.
I was like not into it at all. I was like, this is not what I want.
I think I would take that and frame it. That sounds like a pretty one of those life-changing moments. No, are you serious?
I will
Oh,
say this though, I voted on Tuesday, November 9th or whatever it was. I voted, I went home, I went to sleep. I wake up at 2 o'clock, I write. So after I voted, I went to sleep early that night. My wife woke me up and said Donald Trump won. I was like, what? Donald Trump won. I was like, how is that possible? I did not like Hillary Clinton. I could tell you that much. I was a Bernie guy. I
Mhm.
didn't have the opportunity to throw my vote his way where it mattered, but it's like, how? I mean, I looked at her name and I looked at his name, and if it wasn't for the fact that he seemed like a despicable dude, I probably would have voted for him. I did not
Well,
want to vote for her, but it didn't
no,
matter.
that's
It's
the
from New
thing.
York City. Like, we're totally blue here. So, I mean, it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. She wrote in Bernie Sanders and it made no difference.
Right.
But it just makes no difference. And popularity wise, she won. Popularity
But
wise, she won.
yeah, yeah. But I also look at the fact that um, 20 years, we would not have believed that a black man could be president. And there's
Right.
a lot of changes that happened over the last 20, 30 years that made that even a possibility. The fact that he won is kind of unreal, but even for it to be possible for a black man to run, to even run as president, that shows that we've made a lot of changes as a society. The introduction of same-sex marriage, which came into Canada in 2003, at the time seemed very contentious. Now we, as a society, we just kind of like, well, that's okay, no big deal.
Right.
I think we have I think we have the capacity to improve, and that's again, as a humanist, as somebody who looks at as a science fiction writer, trying to look forward and seeing how things might play out. I think I have hope for the world, and even when I'm not hopeful, I'm still willing to do some work for it, and I think a lot of others are too. So we don't have to necessarily revamp the American electoral system just today. Maybe by next week, if you guys could sort that out, that'd be great. But let's work on what we can work on right now, and part of that is figuring out how crappy we are to each other and how to change that.
Well, I will say this. At one point during the Ice Age, the human population on this planet potentially got down to as low as 30,000.
Yeah.
We rebounded to obviously a very, very astounding 7 billion.
Yeah.
So even if the top layer of this planet fills with many magnitudes of skeletons in the next 100 or so years. We won't die out completely. We're very intelligent. We're a very capable species. And there will be humans. And at the end of the day, 100 years from now, it won't matter to either one of us what Donald Trump did or didn't do, or what whoever does or doesn't do. Hopefully, our children will make a difference. Hopefully, it's our turn now, and we're not selfish assholes, because it's turning out to look like we are going to be selfish assholes, even more than our parents were selfish assholes. And that's on top of what they call the greatest generation, who dropped everything to fight the fascists, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they came back and said, you know what? We want the most calorically dense food in the world so we never go hungry again. And they
Yes.
made us all fat and horribly disgusting and and lazy. And they blamed us for being lazy. And they said, well, you need to get out and work. And they gave us crappy jobs for crappy pay. And
it's true. But I mean, there's a lot of issues that come along with that. The disparity in wealth, the huge amounts of wealth being held by a very small number of people. And I'm no Marxist, but I would like to see a little less of that. But I think our willingness to actually get up and do something, whether it's arm ourselves and fight the fascists, or whether it's do something for people in need around us in our own local, in our own backyard if necessary.
I don't think violence is the answer, but I do think that we need to fight the corporations. I think we need to fight back against the people with the money. And the people with the money, they control us and make us sit through the commercials or whatever. And we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to pay the cable bills. We don't have to pay for the content they want us to pay for. We can control.
Yeah. And it allows us to change as a people, and I think that's the important thing. It allows us to figure out what we actually want to do rather than do what we're told to do. And I think that is the promise of this new age.
And we can form our own communities, and I think that's interesting that we get to talk to each other now. You know what I mean? Over Google Hangouts. Google's an interesting company. They're not necessarily publishing our novels, but they're allowing us to publish our words. They're allowing us to put blogs out. They're allowing us to record this conversation and plug it into YouTube. YouTube is a money-losing institution for them, and they're not making anything off of it, but yet they're making millionaires with it somehow.
Yes.
I don't know how it's exactly working for them. I don't know how any of this works, because like I said, I didn't do well on the classes I probably should have done well on, but man, I did good at those creative writing classes. I did really good at drawing dragons and math. I mean, I didn't do good at stuff I should have done good in, but excuse me.
Well, that's, I did English literature in school too. So there's a reason I'm not a Google millionaire, but I agree. It's like anything that big and complicated. It's like a country, you can't just say it's X or Y. There's good and bad in it. But I think it is we have to take responsibility as people and use what we can and do what we can with it.
Right? Our actions, right? I mean, how do we do this? How do we use Twitter? How do we use Google? How do we use our voices to make this world a better place? And we start small. I mean, we start together. We start with this conversation. We start by having 47 of these conversations, right? Or how do we do this together? We publish novels. We publish our idea of utopia. We publish our idea of dystopia. We publish what? How do we do this?
Well,
what is your idea with your novels and marketing and getting your voice out there, making this world a better place? Let's start there.
Well, as I said, I see, from what I've experienced, what I've done in my life, I see that there's some things that I wish people would think differently about, that I wish people would even start to think about, whether, these questions of like, what kind of power should we allow people to have over us, those kinds of things. When it comes to a policeman, how deferential should I be? Well, I know how deferential I should be, but why? And what drives that need to allow someone to have armed force or have life or death power over me, despite the fact he's a sixth grade dropout dickhead? So those kinds of questions lead me to say, well, I'm going to tell a story that makes that brings these questions out, that has an opportunity to ask these questions. And hopefully the story itself will be interesting enough and compelling enough and maybe emotionally connecting enough that that person reading it will say, God damn it, he's right. and that's the reaction that I want. Now, how I get it out there is another question. I was lucky enough to find a publisher who this story resonated with, and I found some readers who this story has resonated with. And it's it's only been out a few months, but I was at a convention in Calgary on the weekend, this past weekend, and I was reading there, and I got a lot of, I made some sales, I made some friends, had a lot of great conversations with people, and that's what it's about,
What
finding ways to connect with people.
what convention was it? God, I love conventions, and I don't go to enough.
I only started last year going to conventions in any serious way. This one's called When Words Collide, and it's mostly a local convention. It's mostly, I'd say, about 75% are from the local area, but it gets science fiction writers from all over Canada come to it, and it's my second time there. It's a great time. I was on some panels. I did a reading. I was involved in a book launch from my publisher. Always great.
Do you get invited? You kind of invite yourself?
That one I invited myself. My publisher was going to be there, so I said I would go as well. But I did having a book out gave me the right, I guess, to be on a couple of panels and get featured here and there in the literature. And there's a convention in Toronto called Ad Astra that I've been invited to a couple of years now to be a panelist and so on. So I'm slowly I'm getting a little bit of credibility thanks to having a traditionally published book.
It's interesting. Did you go through agents or did you just go through the publisher?
In this case, I did apply to, I sent it out to a lot of agents, and I got some nibbles, but nobody really took the hook. And this publisher is a Canadian science fiction publisher who I've met him, the owner, before. He's at all these conventions. We've chatted before, and I knew he had a little bit of a political slant in what he published, so I knew that he'd be a good place for this. So he opens up to submissions only rarely, and I knew a submission window was coming, so I kind of spiffed up that he liked it, so he bought it.
So interesting.
And we have a handshake deal for my next one too.
It's fascinating.
So this was the one directly.
I have one book on Amazon. I just said indie published it, kind of. I'm not doing anything. I don't know how to market. I did every single agent in the entire country, queried them, didn't get any responses back except for the canned or the black hole. And I didn't do any publishers. I just avoided it. I just figured that it wouldn't do anything for me. The whole thing is really odd. The easy part is putting the words on paper, right? I mean, that's the part we love. I mean, you wake up every morning, it's like, yes, it's Christmas morning every single day. Then you finish something and it's like, okay, now what?
yeah. And
my Google Documents is filled with stuff. You know what I mean? It's like hundreds of works that are just sitting there waiting to be read. And it's like, now what?
And our options are something like, throw it against the wall and send it to agents and so on, or put it in a shoebox and hope that somebody somewhere will open the box and find
my son, right? When I die, Dad wrote so much stuff.
But I mean, putting it on Amazon is not that different from putting it in a shoebox, right?
No, right. Or putting it on my blog isn't much different than putting it in a shoebox, or putting it on Reddit isn't much different than putting it on a shoebox. I mean, you can't do everything. I mean, I said, your cover is beautiful for your novel, and you had nothing to do with that, did you?
No, actually, my publisher asked me, "Do you have any ideas for the cover?" I said, "I don't know, a spaceship."
Spaceship. You broke up on me for a second.
So I actually met the designer, the artist who designed that cover. Am I still?
You're there. You're there now, but go back. Okay. Your publisher said, "Do you have any ideas for the cover?"
Yeah, and I said, "I don't know, maybe a spaceship." And he said, "Okay." I guess he said, "Well, this guy doesn't know what he's doing," so he moved on. And he's used many times a cover artist named Dan O'Driscoll, and I met Dan for the first time on this last Saturday in Calgary, and he read the book and chose a moment and put this together. But also, I think my publisher keeps saying that he thinks I'm a 21st century Marxist version of Robert Heinlein, which I think is a compliment. I'm not quite sure, but I think the artist and he concocted this idea to kind of have this 1970s, 80s science fiction feel to the cover, with those kind of geometric and those kind of very broad lines and most action and so on. I mean, so I can't tell you how much I love this cover myself. And the moment I saw it, I was 100% happy with it, and I'm very proud of it. It's one of the reasons I'm very glad I went with this publisher, was that he put together a stellar piece of and if you're gonna put a box with my words in it, I'd like this to be the box.
Yeah, that definitely, I appreciate it because it's stunning. It sticks out. When I saw it, I was like, wow, that's a pretty neat little cover.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier.
Robert Heinlein, I mean, I'm just looking at him now. He died in
Mhm.
1988, so I mean, definitely, you could be the reincarnation. When were you born?
73, not quite the reincarnation,
Oh,
but
okay.
you might want to call me a pupil because I read nothing but Heinlein for a couple of years when I was in high school.
Oh, did you? I've never read any of his work. I
It's
do a
maybe it's maybe a little
I do
problematic
a
now.
okay, well, you have to have like a somebody that you emulate. So maybe this is a guy. Is he
Maybe.
Canadian? Nope, it's
No.
US.
Yeah. Very misogynistic books. I don't know if they'd really pass muster today, but they had a lot of sex in them, which as a teenager was pretty good stuff.
I do another podcast called Mirage. It's speculating on speculative fiction and other
Hmm.
topics. I'd love to have you on there to talk about them if you're willing one day.
For sure.
We'll do that. You could be the Robert Heinlein expert on Mirage. So I guess it's all just a matter of trying every day, doing the right thing, and I guess being a part of the community. It's not us versus other writers. It's part of it and doing it. I
I
guess.
agree, and I've done a lot of work for writers' organizations in Canada,
Yeah.
and I really see the value in us writers getting together. Doing stuff together, learning from each other, just bumping into each other and having conversations. I think is so valuable. Just unending value in that.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, we've been talking for about an hour.
Hmm.
Man, I don't even know what we talked about. This has been a great conversation. Did
Yeah.
you think we need to mention anything else?
I my Twitter handle is coffee writing. I'd love to see folks on there.
Absolutely. I made sure I mentioned all of the links. I think I did anyway. I have no clue what I
Oh,
did. I'll be going through it here in a second. Um, what are you reading right now?
what am I reading right now? I'm reading a series of Italian novels by a woman named Ferrante. That's been what I've been reading these days. But growing up
In
in
Italian
1950s
or
Italy.
translated?
Oh God, no. I
Okay.
have no language capability whatsoever.
I was about to be
Other
very, very
than this.
impressed.
No,
How do you
sir.
spell her name?
I'm sorry?
How do you spell her name?
The last name is Ferranti, Ferranti.
Is she science fiction?
No, this is very I'd say it's much more literary, but it was recommended by a friend and I've really gotten into it. But that's just happened. I find I read a lot of different stuff, so I kind of cycle through um, a lot of different books.
A lot of people say that is a great way to become well-rounded.
I think it is. I think if you stick in any one group, you're going to find it becoming an echo chamber sooner or later. So bringing other ideas in is really useful for you and for the people that you're talking to. So I try to
Absolutely.
keep that in mind.
I feel bad, honestly, because a lot of people that I talked to read a lot of the great fantasy and science fiction authors growing up. Like, man, I wish I had such a great, background in that subject matter. Because my mom's a librarian. I
Oh,
had the library was my playground as a child,
wow.
but it was all the alphabet and the Dewey Decimal System. I would just run up and down the aisles, picking whatever I wanted, whatever looked good, title wise. I didn't have, like the science fiction section or the fantasy section. So I got to read all
I
over the
think,
place. Like,
but I think you're better off just running down the shelves and picking up things that look interesting. That was what I used to do. I actually worked in a library when I was in my teens, and that was a lot of what I did as well. Was just, and you learn so much. There's so much to
yeah,
learn. There's so much to read. I don't think there's any reason to limit ourselves.
that's what I've been thinking. I mean, it's like, wow, how did I read so many different things? I mean, what do I write? I write an eclectic variety of different fiction. I'm all over the place.
Well, same here. I've decided lately that science fiction is going to be what I'm going to work at these days. We'll see what the future holds, though. If another idea strikes, I'll use it.
Why limit yourself? I consider myself a spec writer, speculative. I write fantasy and science fiction, and maybe they blend in with magic realism a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, whatever you're gonna do, just write, enjoy yourself, right?
Exactly.
If you are going to advise somebody who wants to write, what do you tell them?
The number one thing for somebody who wants to write and hasn't written, I really ascribe to the idea that writing, some words is better than no words, and a lot of words is better than some words. So just start writing where you want to write. There's a lot to learn, a lot to do, but if you don't start writing, you can't do any of it. I really resist this idea that we have to be world building and outlining and everything to be able to be a writer. I think the most important thing to do as a writer is to write. And that's where I always advise people to start. Tell the story you want to see, that you want to hear.
The best part about it is it's not even your story until you're done with it. It could be completely
That's
different
right.
at the end of the day.
That's right. But there's no substitute for putting words on paper.
Right. There's no substitute for writing if you want to be a writer.
Exactly.
The blinking cursor is worthless on an empty page.
That's right.
Well, Matthew, I really enjoyed this. I'm so happy that I got you to come on, and that finally you sent me an email back.
Yeah.
We will definitely do this again. I will send you an email about being on Mirage, my other podcast. We'll do Robert Heinlein. Did I just mispronounce his name? Is it Heinlein?
Nope, it's Heinlein. Yep.
Cool. If you want to do another author, you're more than welcome to come up with another one if you have a favorite that you'd like to do. But it is specifically about speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, horror. You name it.
For sure. Yeah. I would love to.
And we'll probably end up talking about Donald Trump and how horrible he is. Honestly, you know what he is more than anything else? He's a mouthpiece for dialogue. Anything he says just starts a dialogue.
It's true. We can thank him for that.
He's wonderful for that, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't want Pence to be president. I really don't. I'd much rather. Maybe Trudeau can come down here and be our president for a little while. Can we have like an exchange program? We'll send Trump up there.
When we're done with him, you can have him. We don't want to hold him away from you, but we need him right now too. So
I'm thinking like a world leader exchange program. We get Trudeau for a year. You get Donald Trump.
I can't imagine that getting a lot of traction here. Well, Donald Trump isn't very well liked in Canada either.
That's probably a good thing that I have no say in anything. All right, Mr.
Get on. All right. Well, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation. I agree, and I'd love to talk to you again.
All right, man. We'll do it. We'll hook it up. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care.
And that was Matthew Ben. I have a full week coming up, so lots to look forward to there. You can check me out on Twitter. Best way to do that is at BRYAIELLO. BrianYellow.com is my website. Fiction, podcasts, Mirage, speculating on speculative fiction. I am getting not only Jason Abbott back on to talk about Burroughs, but the amazing Emma Hardcastle is returning this week to talk about Mitch Albom. Lots of good stuff coming up. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.